Welcome to Wired Differently, Neurodiversity in Tech, the podcast that explores the unique experiences and challenges of neurodivergent individuals in the tech industry. Please note that our content shared is for information only and entertainment purposes and should not be considered professional advice. Enjoy our show. I am Steve Burke, safe practice consultant, owner of Burke Ronan Consulting, and I'm ADHD. And with me is Carissa Peck.
I'm
Close
CEO.
Agile.
Oh, I was going to introduce myself, Steve.
Oh,
We
geez.
should have talked about that. Like, folks can just tell. I'm going to introduce myself.
Go on.
Carissa Peck. I am the founder, CEO, executive director, depending on who I'm talking to on the day, of Inclusive Agile. We are a learning and development company that focuses on bringing psychological safety into Agile practices.
Excellent. Well, welcome. We've definitely got an interesting episode today. A very important topic, I think, to both of us and probably to many of us who are listening today. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria in tech. This is something I know I've experienced many times in my life, and I didn't have a phrase or understanding of it until I met Carissa and she mentioned it once, and I'm like, what is that? And then I quickly learned and go, oh my gosh, that is something that I've dealt with, and I know many people who do. So we're going to go through that. And
Do you
so,
want to share a neurodivergent moment of the week, or do you just want to mix that in with the?
yeah, I do want to first go through a neurodivergent moment of the week. I'll let you go first. I have one, but I want to hear yours. Yours are always so very entertaining.
Okay, well then I'll choose the entertaining one. We're going to go back to the Carissa has no idea of object permanence issues. I went to feed the dogs, and they get like a little bit of wet food in the morning. So I picked up the scoop of the dry food and the can of the wet food from the pantry, and I walked up to the kitchen and I looked down in my hands. It was worse than that. I picked them up, I got the wet food out. I looked at it, picked up the wet food, got the dry food out, walked up to the kitchen, and there was pineapple juice in my hand. It's not that I picked up the wrong thing. It was I set it down and then immediately then picked up the wrong thing. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone or something, where I felt like somebody was punking me. I'm like, why is this in my hand?
Well,
anyway, sorry. That's going to be my moment of inattention for the week.
My neurodivergent moment of the week. I created this wonderful checklist at the beginning of the week on Monday of things to do after work. I'm like, oh, I want to accomplish all of these things. And I'm going to check it every day after work. And so I would get done, open up the list on my phone as I was walking into the house because I work from home, and immediately start doing things that were not on my list. And so I accomplished 0 of the things on my list, but I accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
Just absolutely nothing on my list.
But I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Like, the list is not always maybe this doesn't apply to this case. You needed to get those things done?
No, it was just I was trying to I was like, okay, I'm just trying to structure myself. There weren't things I had to get done, but I'm like, okay, these are maybe things I should get done at some point. Like I had an example. I had an iPad that my son at some point had gotten smashed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just needed to wipe it. Well, in order to wipe it, you have to put in like a password. I'm like, okay, I have to now request to get the password changed. And so I'm like, okay, you've got 7 days. And so the 7th day was coming up. And so today is day 7.
Okay.
I had all week. That was on my list.
Yep.
Did I do it?
No. But you used one of your coping tools and you were productive, even if you didn't do the exact same thing, right? You got over the inability to start tasks by having
Yeah.
that. So that was
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah. So I was at least productive, did things, accomplished things. Uh, it's just I didn't accomplish the things that were on my list.
I feel that.
Yep.
Okay, back into rejection sensitivity.
Yes.
I'm going to let you take the first slide.
Okay. Well, we wanted to really, we're not going to read all of our slides today, but this one we did want to just give a clear definition. So the rejection sensitive dysphoria is a condition where individuals experience extreme emotional sensitivity and pain in response to perceived rejection or criticism. The condition is particularly prevalent among neurodivergent individuals, such as those with ADHD, but it can affect anyone. And it is very intense. I don't think I understood how intense it could be. And so, that's why I think we wanted to delve into it and say, well, what are some of the key factors? And so we're going to kind of highlight those. We're not
Yep.
going to go into all the detail that we found. We're going to provide a lot of resources, links, and maybe even some books that we may reference when we do the post later. But we want to talk through and also give examples. So let's go to the next, because we want
And
to talk about
sorry.
what it means. So intense emotional reactions. It's crazy when I thought on this for myself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the intense emotional reaction is disproportionate to
Yeah.
maybe the rejection received.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, it could be the slightest criticism. So in the work environment, it could be, let's say, Chris and I were talking beforehand about, you do a retrospective. You're doing a sprint or iteration retrospective, and you're saying, hey, what went well, what didn't go well. And then that's usually when things are brought up about what didn't go well. And it's encouraged to be as forthcoming as you can. And it could be, hey, Steve, you didn't check in your code until, day 7. We needed to have that by day 5.
Yep. Yep. Right. And
And
that's just a statement of a fact, that they're not saying that you're a horrible person, but it feels in the body. This is one of those fight or flight things that gets triggered. And it feels like you are about to be expelled from the tribe, or you're about to be eaten by a tiger. Like, it is an intense physical feeling, not just a emotional sadness, right?
the physical symptoms, they're not joking. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
start to physically feel it. You're sick to your stomach. You physically feel pain. I know for myself, I have, nerve problems. And so, my nerves feel like on fire, on edge. It affects your relationships. Now you feel like you're walking on eggshells with your team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and then you start to just over analyze every single interaction or possible interaction.
Yep.
And everything, you start to analyze everything that's happened, right? And it just makes you on edge.
Absolutely. It makes you on edge, and people can take this different directions. Sometimes will people become uh like very people pleasing, right?
Mhm.
And less authentic, because they want to be they don't want to feel that rejection. We're going to go into some more examples as we go through more of these slides, but like as an overview, those are some of the things that I think we have another slide that talks a little, no, the next one's more about coping. I think we'll go through very fast that next slide, because we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
uh, One more thing I want to talk about on this slide, though, before we move forward, is that the reason it's a chicken and egg, nature nurture, all of those things for folks with that are neurodivergent, because A, we're just more sensitive, and B, because we're ADHD or OCD or maybe dyslexic or all of these different things that are neurodivergences, you get a lot of criticism. You need to sit still. Why can't you read that? It's so easy. Like you get, I'm trying to remember what this stat was, but it was like 10x more criticism as a child. And so you're way sensitized to a thing that you're already sensitive to.
Yep.
And this is something that's only been really studied in the past few years. So I think we'll get a lot more information about why this happens as we go. But I'm going to move on because I want to get to some of our examples in our, especially in tech.
I do want to say, just put this out there. Because sometimes people take this as, well, why are you so sensitive about these kind of things? Just because you're sensitive does not in any way mean you are less.
Yep. So
don't ever let anybody make you feel like you're less because of that. So
thank you for saying that, because that's a hard one. And that comes up a lot in work settings because people are trying to be seen as competent. And being seen as sensitive somehow is less competent, right? You're not able to handle the thing that's going on. You are reacting in a way that like people are judging you for. So it's kind of bizarre, and I could get into a whole rant about patriarchy and how it hurts everyone. But like there's this machismo, this feeling of like you must be perfect, and this feeling of like that is a sensitivity is a feminine trait. But and we won't get far into that, right? But like you know what I'm saying, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. That's how it's perceived. And so it's perceived as less competent. So let's table that, because I could go on a rant
I would be right there with you.
for about how some of these traits get like intensified based on identity. And it's totally not fair. Totally not fair to all of the sensitive people out there having to mask their extreme strength of being sensitive. Yeah, it's totally not fair. Hurts everyone. So, okay, we're going to skip kind of through this quickly because we are going to go through all of these things on this slide as part of some of the other conversations.
Exactly.
But I don't think that we ever talk about this last point, and I want to make a really strong point here. If this is something you struggle with and you don't have a therapist, being able to find one or looking out for one to help you walk through these, to learn about cognitive behavioral therapy, learning about distortions, all of those things have been so helpful for me in my therapy professional kind of context. So I'm going to call that out because we won't talk about that in depth elsewhere, that this is one of those really concrete places that it's not just tell me about your mother. It's sit down with somebody who understands RSD and can teach you skills to cope with this very good therapy use case.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Our next topic here. I'm going to, where do I want to tell this story? I'm trying to see if I want to. Steve, you had started talking about this a little bit,
talking about this in like retrospectives. It's also very interesting. This really manifests like in annual reviews, one-on-ones. And this is where, just quite honestly, why I wanted to get into management and leadership for so long, because I was on the receiving end of continuous bad management and leadership, where it was, well, I could give you positive feedback, but let's focus on what you're not doing right. And I'm just going to give you, critiques, because then that's how you're going to get better. And talk about, just creating basically, for anyone, whether you're neurodivergent, neurotypical, doesn't matter. You're creating a hostile environment when you do that, because, that doesn't work for anybody. I don't care what industry you're in then, right? If it's always just focused on the negative, you know, why would you want to work there, right? But
Absolutely.
there are a lot of places you can get feedback, but one of the most damaging places that you can get it is actually in a one-on-one. And that's also the greatest opportunity. And so, like, when you are giving feedback, you always have to be giving. I had a rule I set for myself. It's not a rule. It's just like, what did I want to hear every time I sat down with somebody one
Yeah.
on one? I wanted to hear something positive.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear something positive. And so I made sure every interaction that I had, the moment I became like a team lead, a supervisor, manager, leader, I always had left a positive impression. I said something positive. I did not leave things unsaid.
Yeah.
Do not assume. Share the positive. And so critique, yeah, definitely you got to provide critiques, but you got to share the positivity, right? Because if you don't, they're only going to hear the negative and then hyper focus on that.
Absolutely. So the one of the ways this manifests, especially on agile teams, is if you have a retro where nobody's talking, right? Um, Retros are such a great opportunity, and we're going to talk about this, I think, a little bit later more. But if folks are worried about rejection, they're not going to speak up, and that can be one of the things that might be uh, feeding into why agile isn't working for you, is because folks aren't willing to get the negative feedback because it is so difficult to deal with. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the skills and some of the coping strategies a little bit later.
Mhm.
Um, I'm realizing that maybe these things are a little bit out of order because I want to talk about some of that now.
Well, we can always skip around. That's
Okay.
totally fine. I much rather focus on, some of the areas because we did touch on this before.
Yeah.
So let's get into the coping
Yeah.
mechanisms.
I'm gonna there's a I want to tell a story just to illustrate what RSD can look like. This isn't in a professional setting, but it's when I learned what RSD was, um, it made something click in my brain about actually my little sister, who from a very young age, um, any feedback, honestly, like she would do something cute, funny. She's 7 years younger than I am, so she was the cute little sister, and we would laugh at her. We thought it was positive laughing. She would just start to cry,
Mhm.
right? So, like the and then actual rejection, like she did everything she could to avoid being rejected. By the way, I called her this morning and asked her if I could tell this story, and she's like, "Yes, you can always talk about me, Carissa, as long as you're not about to reject me." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you, Holly." um, anyway, so it doesn't always look like somebody. The rejection is not always triggered just by giving actual negative feedback. It can be triggered by anything that feels unsafe. So for my sister, it felt unsafe to be laughed at. She was too young. I couldn't process that there are times when someone laughs at you, that it's a good thing, that it's a social, like, bonding moment. There are adults that have the same feeling, right? Like that
Mhm.
if you're neurodivergent, you might not always know that this interaction was meant to be fun and light and affirming, because you're laughing at someone and they have this response that feels like danger in them.
Mhm.
Uh, so the one of the best coping mechanisms is, a, just know what it is, like you said, Steve, right? You know in yourself when you start feeling that this is a distortion of reality, it is not reality.
Mhm.
And so having that awareness within yourself, I think, like you said, is one of the biggest things. And then as a team, having an awareness of This is a thing that happens. If you have to build a psychologically safe team where people are willing to either, people don't have to admit that they have rejection sensitive dysphoria for it to be talked about.
Yeah.
But if you haven't done baseline work to build psychological safety on your team to where people trust each other on some baseline level, then you are never going to be able to help the folks that are dealing with the bigger struggles.
Mhm. I think that one thing I found is understanding on a team the way people respond to adversity. And I have typically learned through hard experience that basically agreeing as a team, making it part of your working agreement, how we all respond and to not just criticism, how do we respond in difficult situations?
Mhm.
Uh, and how do we agree to accommodate one another? One of the most difficult teams, which became one of the most high performing teams I've ever been on, had the most varied responses I've ever seen. One, person uh, had a fear of presenting.
Oh,
So
okay.
to do demos had to go into a physically different room. So, right?
I
You know,
think
so
that's
we
great.
so we did that. And then another person couldn't handle face-to-face confrontation. And
Mhm.
so we would do a similar thing. We would do it via chat. So we just found ways to interact in a way that helped. And I know for me, I found the thing I always have to tell folks, both in my professional and in my personal life, like the biggest thing that triggers me is silence.
Mm,
No response is about the worst thing you could do to me. Um, you know, a simple, just quick, need time, not now, will buy you infinite amount of time.
yes.
No response makes it about the worst thing it could be. And I don't know why. I have worked hard to overcome that. But, in any kind of relationship, like in a team, that's why in teams, I always make it very clear. Hey, if you've watched those cooking shows with Gordon Ramsay, he makes it very clear. Talk to each other.
Mhm.
You got to respond. We can't read the mind, right?
Right.
And that's the thing. Communication. You do have to verbalize, and so you got to find a way that is comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And silence is hard. It's hard to read into that. So,
Yeah. I had not really processed how I know silence is hard, but my partner and I had to write almost a script, like, because he has to process. If I'm upset about something, he needs like several minutes to like say something back. And that is murder for me. Like, 'cause I
yeah,
don't, am I waiting for a response? Are you so upset that you can't respond? At
right.
what point should I be worried that this silence, like, right? Like, so we have an agreement, like you said, and we have an agreement that when this is happening, I can ask, which thing is going on, and he just needs to say, I need X time to process. I'm processing this. I will respond, in when I can. I hadn't really thought about that, but that's the way our different brains show up. And I'm like, I want to talk it through. I want to just blah, 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 blah. And he needs to like
Mhm.
inside his brain. And on teams, that can be absolutely murder, for your teams to try to deal with. Uh,
Yep.
Rejection sensitivity can be kind of the antithesis to innovation on a team. So,
Yeah.
right? You've got an agile team that is, you're supposed to be trying something, fail fast and innovate, or iterate, sorry,
Mm.
fail fast and iterate.
Yep.
And people feel like they're going to be punished for a failure,
Mhm.
they're going to slide into perfectionism, and you
Right.
never get those. You don't get anything. They only do safe things, right? So you don't get anything innovative if you don't actually reward people for trying something. Reward people for the process, not just for the outcome.
Right.
Like, we tried something, it didn't work, but you know what? That's what we committed to, trying something. We didn't commit to the outcome. We committed to the process.
You just hit on it. Answered the question right there. How can they be more supportive? Support the process. There's
Mhm.
so much devaluation of supporting process and its importance. If you want to truly support teams, support the process. You may not, so get out of the process, simply support it. Allow it to run. Don't feel like you as a leader have to control it.
Yeah, right. And
Allow it to run.
this is a topic that we're going to do soon, which is metrics,
Oh,
right? Right. This plays
yes.
into metrics so much because we generally reward people based on these numbers that come out at the end, or
Mhm,
punish, right, based on things that come out at the end of the
mhm.
process, rather than rewarding them for the work of the process. So we'll talk about that more in a metrics episode, but that's why metrics are so bad. It can be so bad, especially on technology teams,
Mhm.
um, because we're rewarding the wrong things and we're not celebrating trying new things. I was talking to someone really recently about their engineering team, and this is a person who's a senior engineer, principal actually, and they generally, like, everything goes really well. They're good at the testing their stuff, but they had two things go out in a week that broke in prod, and uh, the response was so crazy. It was the response was something more along the lines of like, oh my heck, like, I can't believe you made these changes. Why did you do these things? They broke production. Not this goes back to, like, this team like wants everything to be very safe. I'm talking around it a little because I don't want to get too specific, but there
Right.
was such a hugely negative response to these two things that went wrong, rather than understanding that this person had contributed so much
Yep.
positive to
Yeah.
changing things, making things better and better and better. You're going to break things. Things are going to fail in production. If you have never broken production, you are not a senior engineer. I'm sorry. Like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll straight up admit, there's a moment in time when I was doing data conversions when I blew away a production database. Now, because I'm anal and very, like, very prepared, I had a
mhm.
copy of that database that I had just renumbered. So within seconds, we put it right back.
Yeah.
But yes, I blew away somebody's database in production. Sure, it was at midnight. Nobody was on it, but I can say I destroyed data in production. And I wear that shame as a badge because, yes, I made a mistake. It was huge. I was
Yeah.
the leader of the team and I did a big boo boo. And it was horrible, but I fixed it. And then I used it as an example.
Yep.
You can make mistakes, but I was prepared, and that was the thing. I tried to reiterate that we have things that we do, and here's why we do them. When
Mhm.
something goes wrong like this, we can quickly fix it.
And we don't hide, right? Like, being able to
No.
talk about it, to normalize the fact that mistakes will be made.
Yeah.
Uh, Agile can be such a powerful tool. I've said this a few times. I maybe not on this podcast, but the biggest improvements in software quality I've ever seen are by having a good agile process. It's not by stopping everything from going to prod. It's by making the things that go small enough that you can handle them, because you're gonna break it. You're gonna have problems go, but learning to chunk things up into very small bits,
Yes.
and dealing with small things, uh, are, really, really can help that. The Sorry, back to retros for just half a second.
Mhm.
If your team is not doing retrospectives, you're not agile. I'm sorry, but you're also doing yourself a disservice from this specific perspective. You have
Yes.
an opportunity in retrospectives to say what went well and to lean into specific things that people did that were good, so that we can combat some of the negative things, some of the negative feelings, some of the rejection feelings, by also putting in, even small things, like really celebrate all of the small wins, and do that regularly. If you like the agile is great because we break things down into small bits and we iterate, right? So you're getting feedback more often. You have more opportunities to both hear negative feedback and hear positive feedback, and to like build on these skills as a team. Every 2 weeks you can be practicing, hey, how do we work on our rejection sensitivity? We've got an opportunity to, as a team, get better at dealing with negative feedback because we're doing it every 2 weeks in our retrospectives.
Right.
uh, I Yeah.
I was going to say that one thing is too, in order to make sure those are really purposeful and I think sacred in my mind for that team,
Yeah.
make sure it's the team. Don't allow leaders to come in there,
Right.
because I've noticed that what that does is it triggers a trend where most of the feedback that the teams tend to give themselves is negative. Then there's no positive.
Because they want to be seen as like pragmatic, and like
Mhm.
they're showing that they can talk about the negative things and all of that. And they're
Exactly.
not, like there's the culture. Your
Yep.
company culture is going to say whether or not people lean into that. Sorry,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to get it to move slides and it's not moving. The next slide is about company culture. The Or only talking about the positives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Depending on your company culture, if you're going to get punished, if the culture is not that, the people need to be seen as humble, but if you show any weakness, nobody will talk about the things that went wrong, and then you get no improvement. Like if you
Yeah.
don't have both sides of it, you get no improvement either way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, managers in uh, retro is one of my biggest pet peeves. Like managers, anything that's senior leaders, I'd stopped going to them. I'm like, to make a point, and then other senior leaders would still go, and I'm like,
Oh, I've everybody knows me in a company that if they see like a manager or somebody who shouldn't be in those meetings because they're not a member of that team actually,
mm-hmm,
they'll reach out to me and say, "Steve, this person's in this meeting." I will come and I will kick out that leader. I've kicked out a C-level, I've kicked out a VP, and I'll do it in front of everybody, and I'll do it in a kind way, but say,
mm-hmm,
"Look, this is their meeting. Um, I'll take your feedback. Let's go. You talk to me, give me your feedback. I'll definitely get with the team. We'll talk about it, and I'll let you know what they talked about,
mm-hmm.
and we'll do that. But this is one of their meetings,
Yep.
right?
And
You got to keep it sacred. It's I know you want to give the feedback, and it tends to happen in smaller companies too because they have that
mm-hmm,
feel with close knit. But that's part of the growing, right? You've
mm-hmm,
got to let them grow and be their own entity. It's like you got to let your kids be kids, and you got to let your teams be teams. You've got to like I said, you've got to support the process.
yep,
Even if you don't agree with how the process is going, if you let it run, you'll be surprised about the outcomes you see. You'll be surprised that they'll be able to manage RSD
yeah,
actually, because they will talk. They will start to open up to one another, right? Because a company simply needs to support the team. It does need to intervene if there are instances where it does appear individuals are being like targeted,
yeah,
but for the most part, You just need supportive environments,
Yeah.
right?
I think we'll end on that. We have some slides that we wanted to talk about AI and ways we've used AI as a tool to help manage RSD, but I think we're already at 35 minutes. So let's just do a whole separate episode on that, and we'll
Okay.
go into more depth. But I think what you just said there is the right kind of idea to end on. In software, regardless of what flavor of Agile or whatever process you're doing, we want teams that are self-organizing, that you can just get stuff done and not have to wait for the bottleneck of getting somebody to make a decision, right?
Mhm.
Self-organizing and self-healing, which is why you can't just teach them. You can't just teach them how to do a retro. You need to teach them about things like rejection sensitivity, gender issues, like all of these things that come up for in between people on a team, so that when something goes wrong, they have skills, they have the psychological safety and the relationships to be self-healing, not just self-organizing. And that's how you get really great software. That's how you get really great business outcomes
Mhm.
on your teams. So
Yep, exactly. And I look forward to, we'll do a whole episode on AI and RSD because I am very curious, and that will take a whole episode because I think there's just a lot of really good topics there.
yeah.
And I've got some examples I want to use about Wolverine and Deadpool as it relates to that.
That movie was so fun. I had to close my eyes a lot, but it was really fun.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone. As always, all the YouTubey things, like, subscribe, give us some comments. We are just getting going, so these will get better. I'm enjoying doing them so much, though. This is helpful for me, right?
Fun.
Thank you. Okay. Till next time.